I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zeiss Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark.
Hi, folks. And welcome to Biased Reactions, Bestiary 3.
Part 7! The most important part.
Yes.
Because it's the one we're doing right now.
Brought to you by the second half of the letter S.
And really, it's more than half of the letter S.
Yes. Brought to you by the letter S. Fair enough, fair enough.
Just because it starts with S-H-A doesn't mean there's not a ton of S-H-A's and S-I-K's and S-K-E's. But which will there be more of? S-H-A monsters, Shaw monsters, Sick monsters, or Scab monsters?
I don't know.
The only way to find out is to be extremely biased towards all of them. Oh, it looks like you're already putting them up. So you can see on the left page the Seething Spirit, which we were already biased towards last time. And we're starting with Shabti.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a Shabti Redeemer, level 4 Redeemer, who clearly has some Redeemer abilities, but also has a little bit of a Shabti ability about the fact that they don't age naturally and can't be turned into undead. That's because Shabti are basically sort of a Karma Houdini created by some jerk who wanted to get out of a bad judgment, some noble or something. So they created a Shabti to face their cosmic punishment in their stead. Not always great for the Shabti that has to do that, but nonetheless, Shabti become their own person, and some of them get interested in Pharasma overall due to the whole, like, I was created to try to escape from this situation. Those are a rare few that are mentioned at the end there. And there's also Sovereign Shabti, which are like hollow figurines that are magic items used to create a Shabti. And it's a pretty interesting situation. It's definitely a weird moral or really immoral thing that can happen only in a fantasy world where you have to deal with these kind of issues of judgment and life and death and the creation of beings out of different pieces of spiritual essence.
This was written by, Elftro was saying this one was written by Quinn.
Aha, awesome.
Quinn Murphy, that's pretty cool.
So let's move on to our next SHA, unless you have something else on the Shabti.
No, I do not.
So this one is just literally Shay.
Yes.
Beings of Shadow. And this one is wearing, like, a mask and, like, white clothes, but, like, underneath it, it's shadow. And it wears clothes of spun from shadows that can shift alongside them. They basically are really, really annoying to fight. If you look at them, they're only level 4, and they've got 2 annoying reactions, one of whom, when someone moves near them, they teleport away. Mm-hmm. One of whom, if you target them with an attack and you miss from their concealment, then they hit you back. So
they've also got 7th level Plane Shift as a 4th level creature.
They do. They're pretty annoying, but ultimately their main on-turn offense is not super great, which is why they have an action to bide their time. It's an activity for 2 actions where they get a second reaction so they can annoy you more with their reactions. And their movement doesn't trigger reactions, which can be a pain if you're trying to use some kind of your own reaction against them. And
Consider says that's okay, you can negotiate with them.
You could probably negotiate with them. But the main thing is they're not really super dangerous. So just as long as you're not trying to, like, catch one, then you're probably going to be pretty okay. Because, like, compared to other level 4 monsters, the Shay's actual ability to take you down is pretty low. With 1d4 plus 5 plus 1d6 cold, I've seen, like, level 2 monsters that can hit almost that hard.
Yes. But they've got quite significant evasive abilities, for sure.
Yeah, and if they bide, then you're trying to melee them, like, good luck, because they can slip away from you twice.
So what's the deal with these, what's the deal with the Shantak? They look like
So they're one of the many different
dragon
like-
horse.
yeah, they're kind of like one of those, great elder out there mythos things, and they're famous for you trying to ride on them into outer space perhaps or other places, and then it not necessarily being a great choice.
Generally, getting involved with Lovecraftian creatures is not a great choice.
But you can use their ability to fly through space to go between Lang and different places on the Dreamlands. They can share their defenses about being able to ride in space with you if they want to.
Yeah, but they can withdraw that protection as a free action.
Yeah. Yeah, they can. And they're very slippery, so you probably will take big penalties on your reflex saves and possibly fall off. Plus, they can do a flying strafe where they fly and make claw attacks on you. Obviously, they don't have to breathe. But yeah, the sidebar says it all. It's like you might want to do it flying on them as a mount because they're very fast and they have a shared defense ability. But it's very risky because they're pretty chaotic evil. So they're just
if you bribe them, they might just be like, "That's great, I've got the bribe now. I'm gonna drop you on a random asteroid to die."
It's an amusing to them location. So yay, Shantak. All right, well,
what about
we made it through the Shahs. How about the six?
The Sic Tempora.
In fact, all of the SIKs are Sic Tempora. So Sic Tempora are very interesting. They are beings with the time trait because they are beings from the dimension of time, which is in the top few hardest to get into dimensions / locations.
So
there are some that are harder. The Akashic Record is harder. Ravagug's prison is harder to get into, or at least out of. But the dimension of time is not easy to travel through, and Sic Temporas themselves are part of the defense mechanisms against creatures who manipulate with the flow of time, but they're also kind of created sometimes when somebody manipulates with the flow of time, so it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Also, these are all going to be high level creatures. The misery Sic Tempora is at level 12, I believe,
those are the weakest of them.
And those are definitely the weakest, and there's no weaker ones stated because the idea is that these are all very powerful beings.
Right. So the interesting thing about Sic Tempora is that they are each attached to an emotion that was singular intent emotion that was connected to some kind of critical mass from a historic event or moment in time or someone messing with the timeline. And even though time is not, the dimension of time is not the plane that is most associated with emotions, that's the crossover that creates life and creates a creature. Because if it's just pure time, then it's kind of more enigmatic than that. And so you wind up with these Sic Tempora, and the misery Sic Tempora, born of pain and suffering, such as just a horrific event where everybody suffered, are, as Linda said, the weakest. Also, all of these are rare.
Yes.
And they generally can't speak, but use telepathy and know Aklo, because that sounds fun. And they always use time lore for initiative, or they want to always do it because they're very good at Dimension of Time lore, and they get a bonus to it because they see the currents of time, and that means that they can try to go first, regardless of what the rest of every other situation was. They have massive regeneration. The Misery Sic Tempora can get a quarter of its max hit points back every round if you don't use
positive
the right
mental
kind of damage.
or calcum, yeah.
Yep.
So they've also got quite a bit of mobility on them with at-will Dimension Door.
Yes, you really want to do mental damage because the fact that it's positive for Misery Sic Tempora is okay, was that obvious that was what was needed to turn off their regeneration? That's pretty challenging to know because of the fact that they, for example, don't have negative affinity, so most positive effects heal them. But or Calcum is good luck if you have this, although I suppose this is a very rare monster. Mental means that someone like a bard with a lot of mental attacks can be really good here. If you can do a Phantom Pain or something and do some persistent mental damage, that can really turn off the regeneration for a while. Can be pretty good. So, of course, each of the Sectempora have abilities that are based on their emotions. So, Misery has Slash the Suffering, where you're flat-footed if you're suffering from misery, aka
confused or stupefied.
Yep.
So naturally, they've got ways to inflict misery,
Yep.
which causes targets to become clumsy, enfeebled, and stupefied.
Yeah, why not? They have a telepathic wail too, where they can assault your mind for mental damage and anguish, also confusing you, which is another misery.
So if you fail a save against one of their things, you're also going to be flat-footed.
Absolutely. Plus, all Sectempora have Uncanny Pounce whenever they roll Dementia of Time Lord for initiative, which, I mean, I said they always want to, and they always can. They also stride and make a claw strike, like, during initiative. Like, it's, I mean, I know some people can, like, draw their weapon or something during initiative. Maybe if you're, like, a playtest gunslinger, you can, like, position yourself on your first turn after initiative. These Sectempora are just, like, such masters of time that it's, like, most people are in the middle of deciding, like, what the turn order is.
Yeah.
And before that's even happened, they've already hit you.
They pierce their claws or weapons through the fourth wall.
Considering Warlock points out, you shout a battle cry at the beginning to demoralize. Yep, you can do a little bit during initiative.
But
you can enter you can enter a stance.
Yeah.
You can yell something out, but moving and attacking during initiative is pretty intense. Sectempora can do it though.
So what's the deal with the Triumph Sectempora?
All right, so when it comes to them, they want to win. They are built off of victory or like this kind of relief and satisfaction of winning. So it could be winning a war, but it could just be like you had something stuck in your teeth and now you got it out finally.
I don't think a level 14 creature gets born from that.
It says in the description that it could.
Okay, I thought you were joking. I guess it must have been a very, very annoying.
I guess it was a really, really problematic apple seed.
Okay, but I'm seeing this ability here. Cheaters never prosper. If you are using fortune effects beneficially in this area,
it'll slow you.
It'll slow you because
you're cheating.
Yeah.
You're not doing it based on your own victory. You're just being lucky. They're all about like the struggle. So that when they come to the material plane, they might like join the side of the underdog to try to gain victory when it's harder. Or a sporting event or a legal battle, they just appear and then try to win from behind. That's kind of their thing. They have clinch victory reaction when somebody uses an action to try to restore hit points, where it's like the Sectempora's like, I'm about to win, and like, oh no you're not, because I cast heal and it healed me for 150 hit points. And then Sectempora says, no. And then
how about I punch you in the face instead?
Yes. It's like, no, you cannot take this victory from me. I am the Triumph Sectempora. And of course they have the abilities that I said that everybody has.
I see Vie for victory. They demoralize. They demoralize without any limitations on distance or penalties from not sharing a language, then stride, then attempt an athletics check. So demoralize, move, and grapple or disarm.
I mean, they do have to be within the reach of a stride, so there is some distance metric, but it's not a 30-foot. Also, all these guys have like Blink and Dimension Door and some other things. Like this Misery has 3 invisibilities. They all have Airwalk. They can just float around. They're made out of time and emotions, like you would expect they're floating around here. And also, the Triumph Sectempora has a winning smile.
It deals mental damage, and makes your attacks against the Triumph Sectempora non-lethal. Smiled so much that you can't do lethal damage.
Considering Warlock says, I use a hero point. Oh man, I rolled lower.
Yeah,
GM, I have some more bad news for you.
Yep.
Love Sectempora are from acts of great love. Also, the alignment of the Sectempora is based on the emotion. So, Misery is chaotic evil, Triumph is lawful neutral, and love is neutral good. They're telepathic singers. They can sing verbal components and auditory performances with their telepathy because they cannot speak, but they need to be able to do that.
Deflect aggression so they can glow with compassion to increase their AC and gain resistance against the triggering attack as a reaction.
That's right. I mean, why not?
I see they're bards as well.
Oh yeah, also the Triumph Sig Tempera, Chaos damages them, and the Love Sig Tempera, Evil damages them. So a lot of them are damaged by the opposite alignment. In fact, so is Hatred, but the Misery is sort of an exception, where it's damaged by positive, or not damaged, its regeneration is ended by positive, even though it can't be damaged by positive, which is really tricky. Yeah, they are bards as well. They actually literally do not have a melee attack. Their only attack is a ranged emotional bolt that does mental damage and piercing damage and a heart song, which causes people to become fascinated by them. And hostile actions do not end the fascination.
They also, you might wonder, like, well, wait a minute. If their only attack is a ranged attack, aren't they going to have to worry about reactions? But they have a special ability where reactions that normally trigger based off ranged attacks do not trigger when they make that ranged attack.
That's right. Plus, they have Telepathic Ballad, which is a super powerful Inspire Courage or Inspire Defense, which is handy. You want to love Sig Tempera as your ally.
But you don't want to have anything to do with the Hatred Sig Tempera on the face of it.
Yeah, you really don't. You really don't. Because they, like, you thought Misery Sig Tempera were bad because they're made out of a situation where just something bad happens, everyone is miserable. But Hatred Sig Tempera are created from just some horrible situation, like a genocide or something so bad that it creates a being that kills indiscriminately out of pure loathing, methodically hunting down and slaughtering anyone who catches their attention. And they're the most powerful of the 4 Sig Tempera that are in here too. So that's even worse.
I see they've got an aura where you don't reduce the value of the frightened condition within that aura. I bet that means they've got plenty of ways to make people.
Also, they have Punish Flight. When you try to escape from them, when they've like grabbed you or something, they can just Garrote you with their loathing Garrote. And that's really annoying. Plus, they attack with their loathing Garrote, which the Garrote has 10-foot reach.
And improved grab.
Improved grab, which their Punish Flight ability does not have. But I guess it doesn't need it because you've already been grabbed. And they can have up to 2 creatures grabbed with their loathing Garrote at once. And then once per round, with their Vindictive Crush, they crush your windpipe with their Garrote, dealing massive bludgeoning damage to both of the creatures that they have both of them grabbed. And also, potentially, stopping you from breathing.
Oh, I guess they don't technically have things that make things frightened, so they probably want to fight with things that do.
They actually do not. They cannot cause the frightened condition other than their massively high intimidation score.
Legit.
Also, you might wonder, like, but they're in the Dimension of Dreams, which we can't really get to. But they sometimes come to the material plane, as we mentioned with, like, the Triumph ones. And when they do, they often try to seek out areas that, like, match the emotion that they like. So, if you don't want to be near a Hatred Sig Tempera, maybe stick away from, like, areas where horrible acts of hatred happened, and you're gonna be okay. Whereas, like, a Love Sig Tempera might live, it says, in the attic of a coffee shop whose employees are skilled matchmakers. So, that's kind of the deal with Sig Tempera.
Legit.
And that is SIK.
What about SKE?
Well, it starts with skeletons.
Yes. Some more additional abilities for any skeleton that you might want to build.
I mean, we didn't have enough already, so what about Blazing Skeleton that's wreathed in flames? That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, Bone Missile uses ribs as arrows or javelins.
Yeah. And it loses hit points because
it's throwing bone powder.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what's this one?
Skeleton of Roses. That's a really annoying one because it can get it can heal itself as it deals you piercing damage. So yeah, there's 4 different skeleton abilities that you could give to a skeleton, plus a harpy skeleton, which is somehow has enough tattered wings to fly. Like, that's pretty impressive, but I guess already, like, dragons should be able to fly, right? Yeah. It can shriek, which is no longer like the actual harpy song, but it's just kind of like a skeletal shriek that can frighten you. And it can attack you with clubs and talons, and is a mindless skeleton.
How about about a T-Rex skeleton. The game needed that.
It did. So that is also a mindless skeleton, and it can skewer you with its rib.
Or trample you.
Or trample you. Or attack you with those big jaws. Like, you know it can do that. Also, Radiant Rebirth. The Whispering Tyrant used positive energy nukes. This is true. Also skeletons.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, skeletal infantry, because everybody's been waiting for the point where you can have a troop of skeletons. And in fact, they're on the cover of the book. But now we can. So if you want to have a gargantuan troop full of skeletons that go up to level 11, because of the fact that
there are so many of them,
you have so many mindless skeletons in there, and they form a phalanx and do a phalanx charge and hurl javelins and lower their spears down and all that kind of stuff, but with skeletons. Now you can with skeleton infantry. They can be a pain to everyone with their many skeleton resistances and their abilities to form a phalanx and raise their AC to a higher amount than some types of troops can do. Alright. So that is skeletons.
What about
Skelm? So Skelm is a really interesting new monster type. So Skelm are kind of like, you know, the other side of the coin to hags, right? So hags are based off of all sorts of like old stories that of like twisted and toxic femininity, and Skelms are kind of twisted and toxic masculinity stories. So these are tales of that they have these horns, right? That are kind of like the horns, the traditional cuckold's horns that and in the same way, the bigger the horns are, the
more powerful they are.
Actually, I think that within a category of Skelm, and I accidentally went off of the page, that a Skelm is actually more powerful if it has smaller horns, or at least in the cuckold stories that was kind of true with the smaller horns. I'm not sure if it says that here. It may not. That may not be the case. There it is. Skelm antlers. It says that Skelms with smaller antlers shame and bully Skelms with larger antlers. They always use some other excuse. Skelms pretend they don't have antlers at all when dealing with non-Skelms, regardless of any evidence or argument. So it's kind of interesting, just the kind of the story elements that you can add in with Skelms in the world. So, for example, you've got the street Skelm, right? So they abuse the deference given to elders and the well-to-do in public spaces. So they use their ability to change shape to appear to be like some, like, you know, old wealthy person, and that lets them get away with just being generally cruel to people around them. Kind of like, you know, the vicious old man in the street in like the really nice clothes who nobody really reacts to. And so the Skelm can rant about targets or build some kind of pretense of a threat in the community's social order, and sometimes even rally a mob to carry out violence against a particular target. Always with old-fashioned styles. So the street Skelm sort of is a lot about those kind of stories of someone who is using the past to, and the sort of the gravitas of the old-fashioned to try to go out against the other or some kind of target that the Skelm doesn't like.
So they've got they can go on frightening rants.
Yep. Which can generally frighten with shame, fear, and anger creatures in the area, and their punishing strike releases their rage to deal some additional damage and push the enemy, which is pretty nice. It really, really adds to their multiple attack penalty, but it does a lot of damage. And then there's the Shrine
Skelms, who worm their way into positions of power and religious groups so they can abuse that authority.
Exactly. So it's just like with the street Skelm on like the idea of just how this like older wealthy person, but this time using religion and trying to twist it around to their own ends. And they're great listeners where they're just like listen to you, giving them confessing to them or telling you your fears or hopes, and they will try to exploit that.
Yep.
They've got a reaction called Seize Prayer, where when they hear somebody casting a divine spell with verbal components, they'll utter their own incantation to counteract your prayer and deal mental damage. So they are jerks. Then there's the Palace Scum. So just in the same way the Street Scum is just like on the streets in society, and the Shrine Scum is corrupting religion, Palace Scums crave power, and that's political power of the nobility and the royalty. And they're going to use social intrigue to gain their strength. So they have a reaction called Corrupt Speech, where they hear someone speaking and they sow paranoia by putting new and treacherous words on the lips of the person who is speaking. So the Scum whispers up to 12 words, and if it makes a deception check, people think that the person who the Scum was triggered off of is the one who actually said it.
And then they'll follow that up with their incite violence, where they give an impassioned speech calling on their followers to attack.
Yep, the Scum could also cast paranoia or suggestion as part of that reaction, which is really dangerous. So they're all about that. And Elftros' shrine is kind of like Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is pretty true.
Yeah.
And then Soul Scums.
What's their deal?
So they are like simultaneously terrifyingly powerful and like really pathetic, because of the fact that. So what's terrifying about them is that they can bully the souls of the dead, and when they bully someone, they bully them to the point that their souls stick around to be bullied. That's a lot of bullying. They're also pathetic because of the fact that they can't even like get living creatures to bother being with them, or even to be bullied consistently for long enough, so they have to keep these deceased victims along to bully them. And they they create feelings of regret and shame that basically cause the souls to stick around. And they have an action, Bully the Departed, where when they're losing, they can bully a departed soul to give themselves regeneration. It's like to feel better about themselves and their life decisions. And they have an isolating lash that can try to like isolate you from your friends and allies, which makes you invisible, inaudible, and otherwise imperceptible, but only to your allies for 4 rounds. And you can't see, hear, or perceive those allies. So it would be a friend with that isolation sock heel in a way.
Friends?
Also, another thing about these Scums, they have penalties to saves against emotion effects. Even though their will save is usually pretty good, but not always. The Palace Scums is weak. But they're, actually, I guess only the Soul Scum actually has a good will save. They have pretty weak will saves, and they have penalties to save against emotion effects, so you can really play with their emotions. They also sort of are created from, not necessarily, like, hags are created from changelings. Scums can be created from any man, but they're only going to pick someone who, like, sort of has power, but also at the same time is someone who, like, has the mindset of a Scum of being, like, aggrieved enough and wanting to, like, corrupt and destroy. So, it's pretty interesting. They also consider themselves to be, like, major rivals of hags, but hags just kind of don't care about them. It's like, oh yeah, Scums, whatever. And it says in Scum society, alliance between Scums rarely lasts long, as it's only a matter of time before one's wounds another's incredibly fragile ego, breaking the alliance. But many form hierarchical clubs with mortal members to delay such conflict and find prospective new Scums to join them. So yeah, that's Scums. What do you think, Linda?
That's pretty interesting.
How much did you know about Scums already?
No, I did not. I had
Okay.
never heard of them until we flipped that page.
Well, there we go.
Thinking about ways to use them in campaigns, for sure.
Alright, well, there's also Skin Stitch. They are not the same as Scum. They are construct frames made of flayed humanoid skin that are stuffed with poisonous insects.
Yay!
Yeah.
There's some nightmare fuel right there.
Yeah, they're havens of pests. They can flay you with their blade. They flay your skin, stripping off flesh. They can stitch skin to sew flayed flesh to its own body to heal itself if it has your flesh, and it's a haven of pests. that can basically give fast healing to animal swarms that are inside of it. If you deal enough damage to the skin stitch, then the swarm can do storing bite on you because you've broken it up and the swarm kind of comes out. Other than that, the swarm is sort of just there. And then there's the variant Skitter Stitch, 8-legged spiders, giant spider skin stitches, for even more fun.
Yep, there's a question. Any animal swarm? Swarm of cats?
It says it's ideal for vermin and insect, but then it says any animal swarms sharing a space with it gains Fast Healing 3. Now, the Skitter Stitch does say it's always a spider swarm because style points. Come on.
Yes, of course.
Uh,
Why does this cute little butterfly monkey have such a horrifying name?
Well, I would say probably because of Mike.
Okay.
So, yeah, Skull Peeler is a well-deserved name. They are considered by many to be downright adorable, especially when viewed from a safe distance. They have soft apple brown fur, Linda, and shimmering insect wings. But guess what?
They like to peel skulls and eat people's
they've
brains?
evolved and they hang motionlessly in the tree canopy and they wait. And then you're kind of like walking along. Maybe you're a long-necked dinosaur. Maybe you're a human or a bird. They're gonna lash out with their tongue and sever your head from your body and pull the detached cranium back into its paws.
Aww.
Yeah.
I'm very conflicted about this creature. I like how terrible cute it is, though.
Yep. It has a reaction Snatch Skull. When it's using perfect camouflage and a creature moves within 15 feet, it leaps towards the creature and strikes with its tongue. If successful, it can automatically grab. So, that's just what it does. It's got an anticoagulant, so it's going to be harder to end persistent bleed damage.
Oh, and it's also got amazing camouflage,
too.
it's
Perfect camouflage. It's going to be hard to notice it there. So, yeah, it's small. So, you know, it's bigger than you might think because it's a size small, which is about the size of like a halfling or a leshy or like a child. You might have thought it was even smaller than that.
Well, no, I mean, I see the lizard in its hand now.
It's got a lizard in its hand.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and there may have been some minor First World influence in there. You never know. That's a Skull Peeler.
First World, you rascals.
It's not the last thing that starts with skull.
Skull? What about, yeah, I see. Skull swarms.
SKU has gotten a lot. You thought you were going to get out of SK, but you were wrong. There's so many skulls. There's even several skull swarms. They are usually mindless, but sometimes if you have a swarm of smart skulls, then it can be even more terrifying. Plus sea skulls that have swimming abilities because they're made of shark jaws and cephalopod beaks. So the clacking skull swarm is kind of your basic skull swarm. It's already level 10. Which is pretty intense for a swarm of skulls, but that's because it can burst into bone shards when you kill it. It has chattering teeth that can confuse you, shrieking screams of horrific sonic damage, and it can frighten you, and it's even can't use frightening scream again for 1d4 rounds, and a swarming gnaw where it can just gnaw you for piercing damage, and that's the basic one.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the Feral Skull Swarm, whose art is on the next page, which is like, okay, but what if they were dinosaur skulls?
Yeah.
What then? And it is good at tracking you down, because I guess dinosaurs it can still smell you, even though it's a skull. And then it has a Feral Gnaw that does damage of like all 3 physical types, so that's good for you if you have resist physical. You can resist all 3 of them.
And it's got a frightening howl.
Yep, it's also got a frightening howl, but it is more frighteninger than the other howl.
Yes, it's more frighteninger than the shrieking scream.
Yep. Plus beheaded swarms, which are fleshy versions of skull swarms, that have, because they kind of have the whole head, and not just the skull. And then the very intelligent sorceress skull swarm, which is smarter than you, while being a swarm of skulls.
Because well, it brings together all of the intelligence from the various creatures.
That's right. That's because of the fact that it is formed by a horribly awry demi-lich attempt. And so that's why it's so smart.
Oh, I see. It has some of the spellcaster's personality
Yes.
that then gets split between the skulls.
It totally does. And it's got Dispel Magic 7th at will. that's a pain, right? True Seeing, spell turning, can siphon off magic, dealing massive mental damage and stupefying you. It's got a swarming gnaw. It can consume spell as a reaction to use dispel magic to counteract you to try to target it, and gain temporary hit points by eating it. It's just like, ah yes, I have eaten your spell. Thank you very much.
It was tasty.
It was delicious. And that's, yeah, there's a lot of Skull Swords, but that's still not the end of SKU.
What about skunks?
Skunks. Okay,
Do they stink? Okay.
Yes. Talks about using skunk musk in alchemy. They're skunks. Like, so if you know anything about the animal skunk, that is what this does.
I see. They've got a sickening musk that they can spray.
They can spray their musk. It's sickening and potentially gives you a penalty on stealth checks for a day if it gets really into everything. Or 10 minutes of thorough scrubbing with soap. And the giant skunk is even sickeninger and can blind you because so much musk gets sprayed on you if you critically fail. And that's basically how they do. And they can bite you. They can hit you with their claws if they're giant skunks. They have a imprecise scent 40 feet. They don't mind the smell of skunks. And that's their situation. I mean, skunks are omnivores who probably aren't going to attack you and will eat insects, but giant skunks are a lot more dangerous because
they can be pretty territorial.
They can be very territorial.
Sounds good. What about this thing? Slithering Pit? What's its deal?
Okay, well, it is...
Oh, it's an extra dimensional pit?
Yeah, do you remember when we were playing the campaign and Eustace fell into that pit thing that just, like, kind of ate him when he went into it?
Oh, that was a monster?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yes, it's an extra dimensional pit monster, Ooze. Ooze pit monster. And that's why its sidebar is a living pit? Really? So yeah, it has a flurry of pseudopods. It can drag you into an extra dimensional pit, which it will try to eat you, and it can spit you out if you're causing a problem.
Forcefully, so that you take damage as it spits you out.
And much as you saw with Eustace, ingesting an extra dimensional space like that found in a bag of holding deals 68 force damage to the slithering pit and all occupants.
If that immediately uses out, you go.
Yeah,
get out of here.
No. It's also transparent when it's not, like, going around with its tentacles, so it's very easy to miss it. Yeah. It's a level 7, strange, nearly invisible, oozes extra-dimensional digestive system pit that loves to live in dilapidated areas. Next up.
Aww.
Sloth!
It's cute!
So there's a 3-toed sloth, which... like, they have big claws, but they're also very slow. 5-foot speed, 10-foot climb speed. It can rend you with its claws, baby. It can hide and sneak while in a tree. I mean, they're not easy to spot in there. And then, of course, the Megatherium, also known as the giant ground sloth, which is a much more dangerous monster than that at
it's
level 5.
It's much faster.
Yeah.
It's got some knockdown ability
musk.
and a stinky musk.
Sure does. It can still rend you with its claw, though. And it can hit you with its agile foot if necessary. And it might be necessary.
It might be.
I mean, honestly, the chances of actually being attacked by a 3-toed sloth are pretty low.
Well, there's an example that the Secretive Druid Enclave might use them as spies.
Yes, they sometimes are. But Megatherium might do it. Because Megatherium, they really... are extremely territorial.
Well, a lot of the -1 creatures are like, it wouldn't necessarily attack you unless the situation was set up for it to.
Like, it still, like, has very sharp claws and is actually pretty dangerous if you go up to the sloth and start bothering it. But if you don't, even if it wants to attack you, it probably can't get to you with its 10-foot climb speed and 5-foot speed.
Legit.
Next up.
What about the snakes?
It's a snake.
We got swarms of rat snakes.
Yep.
And vipers.
Yep.
So as you might expect, the rat snakes are not poisonous, but the vipers are.
That's right. Rat snakes can wriggle on you and for some reason make you frightened one. And they can do a swarming strikes where they bite you, but they're not poisonous because, like Linda said, rat snakes are not poisonous. The vipers are super poisonous, and they can spritz poison on you and poison bite you and make you clumsy and enfeebled and very upset about your life decisions of jumping into a viper swarm.
That art is so full of boobable snoots.
Yep. Very many cute snakes in there. Next up after that is going to be Sphinx. It doesn't have the kind of original Sphinx, but it does have two new, well, not completely new, but new to Pathfinder 2nd Edition Sphinxes, the Hyraco Sphinx and the Elder Sphinx. So Hyraco Sphinxes are chaotic evil falcon-headed sphinxes, and they do not care about riddles and clever conversation.
They're not nearly as smart as the other
smart.
sphinxes. They're cowardly and territorial.
They do have a contingency glyph on there. That's the only real riddle, is what energy damage is going to be that is going to give them haste. And they're going to pounce you, shriek at you to deafen you and potentially stun you if you're very unlucky. And then just kind of beak and claw you until you go down. Plus, if you try to ride on them, which is like legitimately a weird thing to do, but they do have the buck reaction like a horse.
Fair enough.
But much more complicated than them, because and taking up more than an entire page, is the Elder Sphinx.
Paragons among sphinxes.
It's 11 levels higher too. They're rare. They've got bardic lore. They are ancient guardians that are semi-divine beings. They prefer to
hold vigil over sacred spaces.
They've got like 1 million occult innate spells, including clairaudience, clairvoyance, dispel magic, hallucinatory terrain, locate, read omens, remove curse, shape stone. See Idols of Stone below. True seeing, ventriloquism, at will, and some cantrips
Oh, I see. Idols of Stone. When they make shape stone, they can shape it into a duplicate of themselves that lets them make that the origin of the effect for a bunch of their divinations and other effects.
That's right, and they can concentrate to transfer their consciousness to the duplicates, which can allow them to then, in their stone form, they can use Guardian Monolith in that statue. Guardian Monolith transforms their body to stone or back to flesh. In stone form, the Sphinx is paralyzed, but it has a lot of hardness.
Hardness and immunities to a bunch of things and doesn't age and
can perceive their surroundings. Yep. And
they also have a quite tricky riddle that they can pose.
That's right. Pose a riddle. It can pose up to 10 creatures within 30 feet to answer the riddle. You either run the riddle out of character by timing the player's attempts or pick an appropriate associated skill for the riddle and see if people can solve the riddle. Sphinx gains a bonus to attack rolls and damage rolls against any creature that answers incorrectly even once. And in a critical success, you're unaffected but can choose to try to help solve the riddle. Whereas on anything else, even a success, you at least attempt to answer the riddle.
Spend 1 action each round on it.
Yep. On a failure, you have to spend 2 actions to answer the riddle. And on a critical failure, you might spend up to an hour trying to answer it. Plus, it can pounce you and make warding glyphs. Why not? Also, the warding glyph has a riddle, and it learns the identity of any creature that answers the riddle correctly and tends to be friendly to them. And if you don't answer it right, then you get hit by the warding glyph. Sphinxes.
Sphinxes. Figure out how to solve their riddles, unless they're the angry ones.
Mm-hmm.
What about spirit guides?
Alright, so the deal with spirit guides, which is pretty interesting, is that...
I see that one of them is a feathered bear.
Yes. One of them is a feathered bear, which is interesting, too, because of the fact that, so spirit guides are one of the types of creatures where, like, we use the term spirit for a being that is not necessarily actually a spiritual entity. And it can cause a lot of confusion, because there's a lot of places where the beings that are the Sarkarian gods are referred to as beings of pure life or vital essence. But then also places where they're referred to as spirits because we don't have a lot of good words for it. And spirit guides are an excellent example of this, because they absolutely have nothing to do with the outer planes or spiritual essence or ethereal essence at all, but are called spirit guides. So basically, they are connected to that living life essence that is very similar to what in other forms can become the kind of leshy spirits of nature. But in the case of spirit guides, are more of an entity within that have an attachment tenuously to the material plane. Sorry, not ethereal. Uh, and they supposedly may have come from the sort of perfect conceptual form of an animal of some kind, or a combination animal, in the same way that like leshy spirits come from like plant vaguely associated nature spirits. So
spirit guides can form bonds with mortals, and sometimes these bonds are temporary, short-term things, or sometimes they can last for the mortal's lifetime, or even for multiple generations of their family.
And you'll see that with the sort of situation in Sarkor Scar with the Sarkorian god callers, who are using something that is their gods are not exactly the same as an unbound spirit guide, because of the fact that these are their gods are eidolons. They are attached to a summoner and are directly connected, whereas spirit guides are unconnected in general. But once they've formed a permanent bond, they're not exactly the same as the ones in here. These are the stats for the ones that don't have a bond. It's very parallel to how we saw the Phantom entry, which had the unbound phantoms, but they're different than the Eidolon phantoms that gain a material form because of their connection. And so you'll see in the description of the playtest summoner, for example, there is a better and more accurate indication of that connection to life essence that you see with those styles of Eidolons. Which here it's a little bit harder because they have the spirit trait, because what other trait were they going to have, but they're still not exactly spiritual. It's confusing. So we've got the cunning guide, which the fox is like the really stereotypical example. It's level 1, and it's got horns and jaws, plus some primal innate spells, and the ability to bond with a mortal. And that's not the same as like Eidolon Summoner. It's more of a sort of once per day, let's form a bond and get some bonuses during this period of time kind of situation. And they lose the incorporeal and spirit traits. And that's sort of why the spirit trait is in there, even though they're not exactly spirits, is that it can be then lost when they form the physical body. And there wasn't really like a life force
spirit, but also
life force spirit trait.
Yes.
And they've got a bonded strike. When they're bonded with mortals, they can do a pretty cool thing where they hit with their jaws, and then they let you, if you're the one they bonded to, as a reaction, strike again, which is pretty strong, especially if their mortal is stronger than them, which is very likely since they're level 1. So like if you can get this fox to hit something and you're like level 4, you can just get free attack as a reaction.
That's pretty convenient.
Yep. It's pretty nice. And they've got 3rd level Wanderer's Guide as a 1st level creature because they're guiding Fox Friend. And then the Strong Guide, which the Feathered Bear is an example, is sort of more of like the idea of a guide who is like, I am the strength and endurance of and ferocity of exactly.
And also with an avenging clause for if anyone dares to attack their wards. That's
right. So if you attack their ward, then they're going to step up to you and claw you. And they've got an aura that gives a bonus on saves against magic. That's even more if it's against a chaotic evil
And while they
fiend.
can't fly, they have a feathered charge, which
They
lets
sure
them
do.
step very lightly as they move.
They do a feathered charge. Plus, they've got bonded strike like the cunning fox, so you can still get that reaction attack. And Mauler, if you're grabbed, you take more damage. Like a lot of bears have that ability because it's a feathered bear. Pretty nice.
How about sprites?
What
can you tell us about
sprites? Sprites are pretty awesome too. Well, yes, this is another one that I wrote the entries, and they really correspond to the ones in Lost Alma's Ancestry Guide, which timing-wise would have otherwise been impossible, except for that I wrote them both, and so I made sure it was correct. So we've already talked about the Nycteras, Melixies, and Draxies when we were in Lost Alma's Ancestry Guide. But there's a little bit more here of you. They sort of give you like the stereotypical Nyctera, Melixi, and Draxi that you can just throw in as an encounter. Plus little sidebars about miniature desserts, how Melixis like to
Aw.
make these like very tiny desserts, and sometimes even larger ancestries come in and use them as a sampler pack. And Nycteras like to give you hospitality, so they've got a bunch of abilities that are exactly from the ancestry, like ultrasonic pulse and speak with bats. But then they've also got the Wrath of Spurred Hospitality. That's just like a monster ability here, where it's like, you have betrayed my hospitality, now I am angry. You've angered the neutral good sprite.
Do not anger the neutral good friendly
Roar!
hospitality
Plus
sprite.
2 status to attack and damage against you, traitor. Then Melixis, which, of course, just like in Lost Summons Ancestry Guide, have legendary Sweet Tooths. And they actually can be, like, pretty productive for a while, but then they sometimes go on a sugar crash. And Melixis have Speak with Arthropods and a bunch of abilities that are basically, again, from the sprite in Lost Summons Ancestry Guide. And then Sugar Rush, where they consume a large quantity of sugar, honey, and nectar, and it then causes them to be quickened, but then afterwards they get fatigued. There's another, like, random monster ability. And then Draxis, Dragon Sprites, which have a bunch of abilities that are from the same from the Ancestry, like the Euphoric Spark ability. Plus, they also have a random, like, Draxi Breath weapon that does, like, it's colorful and it does a sort of random thing that is similar to some of the pixie arrows that that pixies can do, because it breathes pixie dust in a 15-foot cone. Plus a sidebar about the Alucria, which is a lifelong bond formed between a Draxi and a creature or creatures, who might also be Draxis, that they're particularly fond of, that comes from the name Alucridasa, an ancient and very powerful fairy dragon that kind of died in the first world and split apart to become the first Draxis, according to Draxi lore. That is what the deal is with sprites.
Alright, time for a spread that's much less cute. Oh, no,
It's got squirrels.
Alright, I first saw the Swarming Swill, but the other side is cute. Squirrel. Alright, but
So
before we get to
Squirming
that...
Swell is basically an evil undead broth. That's what it is. Is barely edible, though, still, even despite being undead.
Why would you eat it?
You can.
Why?
A hag who fancies herself a gourmet might serve her guest a steaming pie with the swell inside. You can eat it. It is barely edible, despite also being an undead.
Okay.
It's an evil broth that can salvage. You can salvage it, and you can use that to basically try to make a potion or oil of lower level than the broth. Isn't that delicious?
But it reeks of simultaneously burned and spoiled food.
That's
makes
correct.
people sickened when they get near it.
That's true.
And it has a slippery grease attack.
It does. It also has malodorous smoke. That is the sickening thing that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also can... its melee is called Awful.
It is pretty awful.
And it also has a ranged scalding oil.
And it looks like a bat on top of a pile of snakes.
It probably is,
something
because
with legs, or something
it's
with, like,
formed from the
talons like that.
cast-off animal carcasses that slowly stew into an overcooked mass at the bottom of a witch or hag's
After
cauldron.
the hag has removed the
Eye of
relevant
Newt,
Newt,
the tongue
and that
of
kind
frog,
stuff.
yeah, exactly.
There we go.
That's what it is.
What about squirrels?
What about squirrels?
They're on topic right now. They're
Squirrel!
literally on topic.
Okay, yeah, you just squirreled it. They can, they can hide nuts for the winter. You can have a swarm of squirrels that attack you with their Scrabbling Swarm ability that can make you clumsy or nibble on you. And the giant flying squirrel is actually, like, the size of a halfling. And, like, honestly, it's probably not going to attack you. They're mostly, like, trying to escape from airborne predators, but, I mean, it is a giant flying squirrel. It can bite you or use its claw if it needs to, and it glides through the air. That's basically what's going on there with squirrels.
Very cute.
It says they're usually no more than a nuisance on their own that can become dangerous annoyance under the command of a druid, fae, or other creature that practices nature magic. Alright. speaking of things in the S that I wrote, we've got the Stheno. So Stheno are a new ancestry style type of creature, and by new I mean not only did they never appear until this book, but also they're new in the world as well. So there's Medusas, they've been around. There's the Euryale, which is one of the 3 Gorgons from Greek mythology. They are a super Medusa that was in Bestiary 6 that were, like, super empowered by Lamashtu. And now we have Stheno, the 3rd of the 3 Gorgons, who are named after one particular Euryale, who, according to the lore here, rebelled against the these poisons gifts that Lamashtu gave to the Euryale and wanted to have her own freedom. And so she prayed to Shelyn for help, and she was eventually killed, but each of the snakes from her hair gained a mind of its own and grew into an individual Stheno, and a new ancestry was born. And this was, like, fairly recent. Only a few generations have passed since then. So, your Stheno character probably is not one of the original snakes, but they've existed for just barely over a century. But if you don't know, like, a really ancient Stheno who is still barely survived at this time, you definitely know someone who did know one of the original Stheno with if you were a Stheno. And so they've sort of been slowly spreading around and just figuring out, like, what is their culture going to be like, because they've existed for just over a century. They care a lot about community and large families, and they love snakes, which they keep as pets and companions for their hair. And their hair is non-venomous and love to eat insects within their reach, and are semi-autonomous but colored by the Stheno's emotions. So if the Stheno is feeling cranky, that snakes are going to snap. And the Stheno harpist here can, like, play the harp, got some occult spells, but also has speak with snakes to be able to talk to snakes, and the snake search ability where it says when the Stheno harpist searches or seeks, their snakes try to help too, rolling a separate perception check with a modifier of -1 instead of +4. The snakes notice something. They try to notify the Stheno, though they are no more intelligent than normal snakes and might find different things interesting than the Stheno does. Hey, look, it's some bugs. Look, it's some bugs.
Yes, I know there's some bugs.
Look, I saw some bugs.
Okay, we're walking over there now, aren't we?
Yep. So that is the deal with Stheno. Also, here's Strix. They are an ancestry that's in Lost Almonds Ancestry Guide.
Yeah, we saw their ancestry version, but here is their bestiary version.
That's right. They love storytelling. And so they're Rokoas, which are sort of their leaders of a Strix tribe. Also can pass down stories through the tribe. They basically are xenophobic and they hate humans most of all. They live in a very, very small area, and they are pretty aggressive against anyone who comes towards them because they've been mistreated by everyone who did in the past.
Yes.
And it leads to cycles of retribution. This is a Strix kinmate in here in the Bestiary who have camaraderie with other Strix that can support them and basically kind of do the gang up type thing where a few people are nearby and they kind of gang up. Do Strix Vengeance, where they do extra damage if somebody dares to get a critical hit against a Strix. And a lot of this is also from the Ancestry Guide as well. And these particular Strix are going to attack you with talons and short bows, which can be actually a real pain in the butt for a level 2. It's flying and attacking you with a short bow. That can be hard to deal with.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. And for more information of us being biased and reacting towards Strix, we've got the whole ancestry in Lost Almonds Ancestry Guide.
That is true. What about what is this guy?
So, Sumbreva, which are a new shadow and negative energy plane kind of monster. So they come from the negative energy plane. They're super dangerous at level 16. And they hunt. They're unstoppable hunters. They'll destroy creatures that come to the negative energy plane for sport and fun and practice. They have night lodges where they display their soul trophies. And they're a major threat on the negative energy plane. Elftro says, also written by Quinn. So they can claim trophies when they kill you to bind your soul. They can do additional damage if you're drained, flat-footed, or frightened.
Oh wow, and these guys are really high level too.
Yeah.
The greatest of them, it says in the sidebar, the greatest of them are said to be an execrable giant suited to hunting only kaiju, demigods, and the spawn of Rabagog. That could be really interesting for plot reasons too, because if one of them sets their sights on hunting something that you want destroyed, it's like, well,
yup. And these
do
levels...
we get out of its way for now and then deal with the fact that it might then just deal with the fact of what's it going to decide to hunt next?
And the level 16 version is the weak one.
Yep.
That's like the runt of the litter.
So it looks like they bind souls.
Yeah, they can bind your soul.
Yeah.
They can deal extra damage if you're drained, flat-footed, or frightened. Their whip can drain you if it grabs you, like, a lot. And, yeah, they absolutely take souls as trophies. If they kill you, they will let out a bone-chilling howl, which frightens people. And it's a lot of frightened if you fail.
They could be fleeing if you critically fail, too.
Yeah, for a while, too, because it's a lot of frightened. They've got attack of opportunity as well, because they're, like, trained hunter, soldier creatures. They're a pain. They're pretty dangerous, and this is the weakest of them. So they're another cool thing on the negative energy plane. You may not know what cool things are on there. Sumbrava is one of them. But run away if you see it.
And if you didn't have the idea to run away already, you'll get that idea after you see it killing someone.
That's right. So there's also Sword Keeper, which is kind of interesting because it's like, well, you know, we've got this legendary sword, and we could put it in a stone, but someone's going to take it out of the stone. What if we put it in a special magical construct that can then create, like, spectral versions of the sword that it's guarding?
Oh, that's
to
cool.
Attack
I see
you.
the sword in the center of it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, is both a display case and security system for a special magical sword. So it's got this central weapon, and you can try to disable it out of there. If you do, it loses all of its echo blades that are echoes of it, which is a big pain for it. It can just punch you, and it's pretty crappy if that's all it can do. But while it has echo blades, it can throw them at you, and they'll reappear in its hand. It can hit you with them. It can do a flurry of echo blades. That's a huge pain and can combine the damage from multiple attacks. It can project echo blades.
To throw them.
Yup, it can do a colossal echo where it uses all of its hands to do an AoE force damage. It can raise its guard with an echo blade to get extra AC. It has attack of opportunity with all its echo blades. So, like, it would be nice if you could get the sword out there with somebody who has thievery.
And it seems that could be pretty natural to make a version of this creature for other weapons as well.
Yes, absolutely. The central weapon ability says that, like, this one has a +1 striking disrupting longsword.
Basically, the thing is that they can house a single weapon of a level no higher than themselves. So that's a good way to determine what would be an appropriate weapon for these guys.
That's right. I guess the fact that it's a +1 striking disrupting longsword means that, yeah, I see. The Echo Blade inherits the weapon damage dice, weapon traits, and runes on the central weapon, but no other abilities or activations. So, in theory, the fact that this one has a disrupting longsword does mean it should also do positive damage, probably. But, like, how many times does your party have undead that would take damage from the disrupting part? Probably not often.
Mm-hmm.
But it should, because that is part of the runes. Pretty cool, right?
All right, yeah.
So, we've actually made it to T.
Well, I think this is a good place to stop.
Shall we stop at T?
Yes, let's.
We can have tea time on Saturday.
Yes. So let's say goodbye to YouTube.
All right. Bye, YouTube. See you next time.
Bye.